Hey there, welcome to Mike's Collection, episode 161. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is my latest action figures. This is essentially the first video I've done of 2022. I did a whole bunch of videos like the last week of 2021 because I was off from work, and so I did my best of 2021. I did kind of a year in review. Plus, I got my Action Force Kickstarter figures, which I haven't had a chance to put away yet, so they're all still sitting here on my desk. And yeah, I still have some figures that I got before Christmas that I haven't got around to showing you. I was really trying to get caught up on all my reviews and everything, but I don't know if I'm ever going to get 100% caught up. But today, I just had another box arrive in the mail from Big Bad Toy Store. So I figured I'm going to just show you what I got today, as well as a couple other items that I got in the first few days of this month and the last few days of 2021. So I figure I'll just show you everything in package here, and then I'll spend a little bit of time showing you all the figures outside of the package. I really don't want this video to go super long. I know I say that all the time, but again, let's try to be kind of quick with this one. So a couple of videos ago, I showed you that I got some of the G.I. Joe reaction figures. So reaction figures are these little 3 3/4 inch figures that Super 7 makes. They're kind of in the style of the old Kenner Star Wars figures. They have about 5 points of articulation, so just their arms and their legs and their heads turn. They're very simple, very basic, very nostalgic figures. And I have a bunch of them from various toy lines. But when it comes to Transformers, I've kind of went all in, and I've been buying all the Transformer ones. And now they started doing G.I. Joe. So I ordered about half of the G.I. Joe ones previously, and I showed you those guys in another video called My Latest Reaction Figures. So anyway, I loved those G.I. Joe ones, so I got some more of them. I still don't have them all. I still need Snake Eyes. He's the one I don't have yet, but I've got him on pre-order. So what I've got here is one of the G.I. Joe green shirts, or just kind of the G.I. Joe Trooper. So with these guys, if you watched that last video, you'll recall me mentioning that Super 7 has made these guys. So these are the nameless kind of support soldiers to the G.I. Joe characters. They were often featured in the old 80s Sunbow cartoon. So when you saw Joe running for their Sky Strikers to take off to fight Cobra, who was attacking their headquarters, you get 2 or 3 of the main, the name G.I. Joe characters running in the foreground, and then you get all kinds of these guys running in the background. So Super 7 has given us this G.I. Joe Trooper, and they released him in 3 different variations. So it's 3 different skin tones. So they released a white guy, a black guy, and a Latino guy. The figures are all the same, just a different skin tone. So the first one I ordered was the black guy. And this guy here, I got the Latino guy. So I know it's a little hard to tell without having the white guy here to compare him to. He might just look like a white guy himself. But this guy does have a darker skin tone. Now, it's not necessarily Latino. Maybe he's Native American. But anyway, he's kind of cool. So we'll take a closer look at him outside the box in a minute. Now, they did the same thing with the Cobra Troopers. So they did the Cobra Troopers in 3 different skin tones. And they even went a step further, and the straps on their back. Sometimes in the cartoon, I guess they were featured in kind of a Y shape and some in an H shape. So they gave you each of the 3 skin tones with each variation head came in either the H back or the Y back straps. I don't really care about the straps on the back. But when it came to Cobra Troopers, I had previously bought the black guy and the, we'll call him the Native American guy. So I did not have the white guy. So I went and got the white guy Cobra Trooper. So you can kind of see how pale he is compared to the Joe. So maybe that makes it a little bit more clear about how the 2 skin tones vary. So again, we'll take a closer look at them outside of the package in a minute. Now, some other individual unique characters in the line that I did not get in my first batch was the Baroness. So she's looking really cool here. She usually is featured in a black cat suit. That's how most people know her. That's how pretty much all of her previous toys have been released and how she was usually featured in cartoons and comic books and such. But in the early episodes, she wore this blue and yellow outfit And she's got the green tint on her sunglasses, which is really cool. So, yeah, I'm happy to add her to my collection in that outfit. Also, I got Scarlet of the G.I. Joe team. So I really like this card art. Like, it's very much a throwback to the vintage 80s cards with the explosion. On the back of each package, every character gets a file card, and you can see all the other characters in the line with the explosion. Very cool throwback. Now, I will say the art, it's not as high quality as the artwork we got on the old vintage packaging. I don't know the artist's name, but this looks a little more cartoony, where the packaging on the vintage figures was like painted, and it was very photorealistic artwork. So while this is still very nice, it would make for a cool display piece pinned up on the wall here. They're still not quite as good as the vintage packaging. So the last G.I. Joe I got here is Quinn the Eskimo. So this guy, these figures are... My understanding is that Super 7 has the rights to make G.I. Joes based on the Sunbow cartoon. That's why they have that very cartoon aesthetic. Whereas Hasbro is making G.I. Joe figures, you know, in a more... They're doing the 6-inch classified figures, which are a little bit more realistic. Anyway, these guys here, Quinn's a bit of an anomaly because I don't think he was ever featured in the cartoon, but he's directly from the G.I. Joe Marvel comic book from the 80s. So I guess they have the rights to do those characters as well. But this is pretty cool. We have received a couple of Quinns over the years, but it was a long, long time before we ever got our first official Quinn figure, and he was very much a fan-demanded character. So it's cool now. I think this is the third Quinn figure that they've released. And yeah, he looks pretty great in his winter outfit there. So we'll take a closer look at him. Now, this here is from the Fantastic Four Marvel Legends Retro Wave. So I had pre-ordered 3 of these figures from my local GameStop. Now, if you see on the back of the package, what we've got here is all 4 members of the Fantastic Four. So the Human Torch, the Invisible Woman, the Thing, and Mr. Fantastic, as well as 2 villains, Psycho Man and the High Evolutionary. So I did not order these 3 members of the Fantastic Four simply because I already have 2 versions of each member of the Fantastic Four already in 2 different outfits. And even though I really do like these kind of classic blue and white outfits, I have, you know, pretty much the same figures already in blue outfits with black trim, and I just couldn't really justify buying them again. So I pre-ordered the 2 villains, because those were new characters. But then I did get the Human Torch. Now, the reason being is because even though I already have a version of the Human Torch in his Johnny Storm mode, where he's not flamed on, and I also have a flamed up version, so I've got the 2. But this one here is painted to look kind of the classic way Human Torch was drawn in the comic books. The way he was always drawn in the 80s, and that's the way I always associated with him. Where he was colored kind of dark red, and he has almost these like black grill marks across him. That's what it looks like he was cooked on a barbecue or something. And he's not always portrayed that way anymore. You know, with comic book coloring has come a long way. They can do a lot cooler flame effects with digital coloring and all that stuff. But this is the classic way that the Human Torch was always drawn for many, many years. And so this figure, it's still translucent, and it doesn't quite capture that look of the classic grill mark Human Torch. But this is pretty close. So yeah, this is the only member of the Fantastic Four I'm getting from this particular Fantastic Four vintage line. But yeah, he's pretty cool. Alright, so that's... one more thing. So this is something that I ordered from Hasbro Pulse, which is Hasbro's website for collectors, and they have a lot of exclusives available only on their site. So when I saw this figure, I was excited about it. I pre-ordered it from Hasbro, and it said it was going to ship sometime in February. So the last week of, or maybe it was like the first couple days of January. It might have been like January 2nd or 3rd or something, the first day I left the house after the holidays. I went into GameStop, and they had it there to my surprise. So I bought it from them and canceled from Hasbro Pulse. That saves me some shipping costs and everything. So this here is Starscream in his shattered glass colors. So what shattered glass is, it's essentially, it's kind of a trope of, you know, sci-fi storytelling or just fiction in general. Like in the old Star Trek episodes when they went to an alternate universe called the Mirror Universe, and the good guys were bad guys, and you could tell because Spock had a goatee, and that was the evil Spock in the Mirror Universe. And, that's been done plenty of times in movies and comic books where good guys go to an alternate universe and the good guys are now the bad guys and the bad guys are now the good guys. And so that's what this is all about. So the Shattered Glass, they've done a whole series of these figures. So Starscream here, he's painted to look like Jetfire, which is the heroic Autobot jet, and yet he still looks like Starscream. So I think this is really neat. I'm not planning to buy most of the other Shattered Glass figures. While it's kind of a neat concept, I don't really feel the need to get all those characters. Like there's Megatron in good guy colors and Optimus Prime in bad guy colors. The thing is, when it comes to Starscream and the Seeker jets, there's a whole group of these guys, and they always use the same mold with different colors. So that's very well established in the Transformers lore, is that there's all these Seekers. They're all painted slightly different. So with this guy here, I don't really imagine displaying him on my shelf as Starscream, but just as like another Seeker. And I love just expanding my Seeker army. I already have about a dozen of these guys in various colors, so I'm really stoked to add this guy to my shelf. And we'll take a closer look at him outside of the packaging in a moment. Alright, so that's everything I bought in the last 2 weeks or so, kind of off the shelf. This stuff here is what came from Big Bad Toy Store just today. So, these guys here are a little late to the game, but I've got 2 holiday-themed Star Wars Black Series figures. So you see here, this is a classic Stormtrooper from the original trilogy, but he's painted red and green. He's got like a Christmas sweater design on his chest. I know it's kind of hard for you to see that right now, but you'll see it better once we get him out of the package. And this is the classic Snow Trooper figure from like Empire Strikes Back, which was always a favorite design of mine. But again, he's painted red and green. He's got a Christmas scarf with like a candy cane staff. So very cool. Now these figures actually came out like a year ago for last Christmas, and there was 5 of them, and they did a exclusive to each of 5 different stores. So like Best Buy had an exclusive figure, and Target had an exclusive figure, and I think Walgreens had an exclusive figure, and I don't even know what the other stores were. Unfortunately for me here in Canada, I didn't have access to pretty much any of them. They were very hard for me to track down, but I thought they were kind of neat, and I wanted to get them, but I didn't have much luck. So I do have a couple of them here. So for example, this is the Range Trooper from the Han Solo movie. So this is a Range Trooper repainted in Santa colors. And I just thought these guys were kind of fun. So I've had this guy for about a year. I've also got a Clone Trooper painted up in a Christmas sweater. So I had 2 of them. And I'd kind of lost hope that I was ever going to get the remaining 3. But then about a week before Christmas this year, Big Bad Toy Store put these guys up on their website. So I guess maybe they got the remaining stock that didn't sell out at the exclusive stores back in the day. Now, they were kind of marked up. If anything, like in price. I was kind of hoping, if anything, they'd be marked down because they're like a year old and stuff now. So I did have to pay a little bit of a premium for these guys. And for that reason, I only ordered 2 instead of the 3. The third one that I did not order is the First Order version of the Stormtrooper. And again, I feel like between the Stormtrooper and the Clone Trooper, I already had covered enough ground. I didn't really need that other guy. Maybe I'll go back and get him at some point, but anyway, so those guys are kind of cool. When it comes to Masters of the Universe, Masterverse, that's their new toy line, I have been intending to avoid it because I'm already collecting the Masters of the Universe Origins figures, which I've got Battle Cat right here. So these are the ones that are a throwback to the old retro Masters of the Universe line. You know, they're 5 inches, there's not a whole lot of articulation on them. And I'm really into those. And then the Masterverse line is based on the new Netflix series. And the figures are really cool. Some of the designs are really cool. But I'm just thinking, like, you know what? I already have a huge collection of Masters of the Universe Classics figures that I collected for about a decade, from like 2009 to 2019. And now I'm buying all those characters again in the Origins line. Not to mention that I bought a bunch of them as reaction figures in this format, and a bunch of them as Funko Pops. So when this new line came out, even though it was cool looking, I was like, I don't want to start buying these figures again. Anyway, I kind of decided I'm just going to buy my favorite characters. I don't know if that will last, because if I get a few of my favorite characters, I can totally see myself caving and saying, you know what, I'm going to buy all of them. But anyway, the first figure I got from the line is Stinkore. So this is the Skunk Man, and I think he looks pretty great. He was only featured in the show for, a couple of minutes. It was a very brief kind of cameo appearance by Stinkore. But he's a great character. And my all-time favorite Masters of the Universe character is Merman the Fish Guy. And they haven't released a figure of him yet in this line. But if there was one figure from this line I was going to get, it was Merman. And if you're a Masters of the Universe fan, you probably are aware that back in the vintage line, they just took Merman, who was a fish man, and painted him black and white. And now he was a skunk man called Stinkore. So I obviously love Stinkore a little bit as well because he's just a repaint of my favorite character, Merman. So one thing I like about this line is that they're not just repainted figures. They've shown pictures of what the Merman's going to look like, and he looks quite different from this Stinkore. But anyway, so here's my first Revelation figure. I think he's pretty cool. We'll take a look at him in a second. Two more figures here to show you. So this is from Super 7. So besides reaction figures, these very simple figures, they also do a line called Ultimates, which are the complete opposite because they're very articulated and they have lots of accessories, and they come in like big, crazy packaging instead of these old little blister cards. So they're doing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Ultimates line, and so they've done 3 waves previously of 4 figures. And in each wave, they do 1 Ninja Turtle, and then they do 3 kind of side characters. So the first wave had Raphael, and then Leonardo, and then Michelangelo. And I've been waiting for the 4th wave so I could get my Donatello and complete my 4 Ninja Turtles. So it's been a long time coming, but finally, my Donatello has arrived in this very cool box. So you slide this off of there, and there you go. There's Ultimate Donatello. And he is modeled after the vintage 80s Donatello toy, except he's got lots of accessories. He's got an alternate head, lots of alternate hands. He's really cool. I've been really impressed with these figures thus far, and I'm sure this will be no different. So yeah, I'm excited to open him up. And the last thing I have to show you is I'm excited for this one. So this is a Jaeger figure from the Pacific Rim The Black, which was a Netflix original series that aired, I think, early last year in 2021. So it was all 3D animated, and it was about a couple of kids that find a Jaeger, and they pilot it across, I think it's Australia that they're in, and they're piloting it, trying to find their long-lost parents. So this figure is really cool. I think it's probably the coolest looking Jaeger we've got to date, because if you remember from the Pacific Rim movies, most of the Jaegers were pretty much a solid color. Like there was a green one, a blue one, a red one. But this guy here has got a very cool, almost sports car like paint job on there. And I think it makes him look very dynamic. So yeah, very cool. And we're not getting a whole lot of Pacific Rim figures these days. The second movie was, I don't know how many years ago. But as you can see behind me, I'm a big Pacific Rim fan. I've got 2 of the little mini posters up here behind me all the time. So yeah, I'm excited to add another Pacific Rim figure to my collection. So we'll take a look at all of this stuff. Alright, so let's do that. So first off, let's take a look at the G.I. Joes. I'm going to do them all together here to hopefully save a little bit of time. So here's the Baroness. So she's looking great. Like a lot of little detail in that face. Like I love her eyebrows look kind of arched in it. Like it looks just like she did in the cartoons, in the comic books. I really like it. I like that shade of blue, the gold trim, and I really like how they pulled off the glasses with the see-through lenses. It looks really, really good. Now, Baroness, as I mentioned in the intro, she's a character that's usually portrayed in an all-black kind of leather catsuit. So here is the original Baroness, from the 80s, and this is a great figure. I think it was probably the best female figure they ever did in the vintage line. But you can see how she's all black, and with the glasses, they were just like painted rims. They weren't really able to give her, that glasses look. And that's basically what they kept doing over and over again, even into the modern line. So again, here's a more modern Baroness. Same idea, with the glasses just kind of painted on there. Again, here's another variation of the modern Baroness. The outfits are all a little different, but basically the same. Now, this is not the first time they've done her in the cartoon blue. They have done that a couple of times. And they have tried to give her lenses in her glasses before, too. Here's an example from the early 2000s, which, I think the suit looks okay, but you can see what a mess the glasses are. The big Coke bottle glasses, they're not, they don't fit her very nicely. They're, pretty unsuccessful in that regard. So yeah, this is kind of our first pass at this blue figure. They did do it again in the modern era, but I think out of all of these, this is definitely one of the nicest. Maybe between this one and the original. But yeah, I really like the painted face detail on this one here. I like the way the lenses on the glasses work. A really successful figure. And again, I know I already mentioned it, how the reaction figures move, but it's very simple. There's no knees, there's no elbows. They don't swivel at the waist. They can't nod up and down. They don't have swivel arm battle grip and all those things that G.I. Joes back in the 80s were considered to be such good figures because of all the movement. With, you see the old figures bend at the knee, bend at the elbow, they swivel here at the arm, move at the waist like that. And later years, they could nod their head up and down. So I can understand why some Joe fans, this might not be their cup of tea because they think it's a step backwards. But for what it is, I think these figures are actually really awesome. Now, when it comes to the Cobra Trooper, again, I think you can see when you compare him next to the Joe Trooper how different the skin tone is. This guy isn't just white, but he's like a pale white. And you see here, this guy's got the H back. I mentioned how there was two different types. Now, another thing I'm noticing about this guy is his eyes. He's got these very mesmerizing blue eyes. A very dreamy terrorist. So that's the white guy. But I had previously bought the other two. So here is the African-American guy. And here is what we'll call the Latino guy. So these two, if you want to see the difference in their skin tone, it's a difference in eye color, but it's also this guy is a couple of shades darker as well. And this guy, this is an example of the Y back. So I don't know if you have a preference, but you can get any of these figures, whatever skin tone, with either the Y or the H. Now you'll notice these guys do have the same gun, which is kind of curious because before I got this guy just now, I had these two, and I noticed that they had different guns. He came with more of a pistol, he came with a rifle, so I thought maybe each of the skin tones came with a different gun. But no, these two apparently come with the same gun. It's just the African-American guy that has the pistol. So these guys look great. Again, they look just like they stepped out of the cartoon. There have been so many variations of the Cobra Trooper over the years. So for example, here is one from the 2000s, which was kind of painted to look like the comic book colors. But it was also during those years in the 2000s that they introduced the idea of having Cobra Troopers with different ethnicities. So you see here, this is a Cobra Trooper, a little dusty. But this guy was released around 2003 or 2004, I think. And he was available as an African American. So that's really cool, because I think every child should be able to see themselves in a ruthless terrorist organization if they want to. Here's a more modern version of the Cobra Trooper. So again, very similar design, the blue, the black mask, the helmet. And, for diversity, even in more recent years, they actually added some female Cobra Troopers, which is really cool too. So there was a bunch of female variations available in the modern G.I. Joe line as well. So again, I love pretty much every variation of these guys that they put out, but there's something about these guys being so simple. It's just very charming. I really love the simplicity of these guys. I think they look incredible. So next we'll take a look at Scarlet. And again, I think this is a really successful figure. I think it's a beautiful sculpt. It looks really nice with the paint job. But I do have a problem with this figure right out of the package. Every variation of Scarlet, she's always had this little crossbow weapon. And I find it's always very finicky in her hands. Maybe because she has smaller, more delicate hands. But it's always falling out of her hand. And oftentimes they make it in two pieces, so the crossbow comes detached from the gun, and it's always falling apart. So I'm glad to see that this is all one sculpted piece, but just in the time it took me to display them there, this thing fell out of her hand multiple times. Her hand's just not wide enough to really grip it. So you see it just kind of wobbles around in there, and it does it regardless of which hand I put it in. So that's really annoying. And none of these figures that I've got in the reaction figure line have had backpacks so far. I was kind of surprised to see that she came with a quiver with arrows. I'm not sure how she should wear it, like if it's supposed to be over one shoulder, which doesn't work so well, or if you're supposed to put it over her head, but that didn't seem to work too well either when I tried it because she's got a ponytail there. So that ponytail kind of blocks it and it hangs pretty awkwardly. So I don't know, I'm sure there's a better way to get this to work, but I haven't figured it out yet. But anyway, it's a really nice figure. I like that face sculpt a lot. Again, it's very simple, very basic, but it works. Like, she's got a pretty face, and it's a nice sculpt. So let's take a look at a couple of other Scarlets. Now, I have the original Scarlet figure. Now she won't stand up either. Now, I haven't really had this problem with many of my reaction figures, but I have heard other people have it, that their legs aren't even the same length, or maybe they're not completely flat-footed, which can be a little frustrating, but I think she just lost her balance a little bit because of the quiver. She seems to be okay now. Okay, so if I bring out the vintage Scarlet figure, I have to kind of slide her in here in pieces, because this is the problem with vintage G.I. Joes from the 80s, is they take a beating. So she's broken in pretty much every way she can be. The elastic that holds them together, that's snapped, and then you can see her crotch has broken off there. Another weak point on vintage G.I. Joes are their thumbs, and both of her thumbs are broken off. So yeah, my vintage Scarlet is in pretty bad shape. But you can see from this head sculpt here, she always was portrayed as having long hair in the comics and cartoons, but here I guess they didn't know how to make that work with the ponytail or something, or they decided to give her this short haircut. But suffice to say, it wasn't like the most attractive figure. I think they've done a much better job on this reaction figure. Now, we have got some improved figures over the years. This is a Scarlet from the kind of early 2000s. It actually uses the exact same body as the vintage figure, but they've managed to give it a much nicer head sculpt, complete with the ponytail and everything, so that looks really good. It's unfortunate with this figure, there's some yellowing happening, so there's some discoloration on the plastic, but all in all, still a pretty nice figure. We've got some modern era Scarlets here as well, so again, you see the same basic design with the crossbow. The outfit is very similar throughout all the years. And then this one here I just got. This is part of the retro figure line. So it's done in the same style as these figures from the what we call the modern era that began in 2007. So this is a really nice one. I like the head sculpt on this one quite a bit. But yeah, all in all, I think, again, the reaction figure is one of the nicer Scarlets in my collection, for sure. It's a really nice figure. So next up, we've got the G.I. Joe Trooper, and I really love this guy. He looks great. Now, sculpt-wise, he is the same as the previous Joe Trooper I bought and showed you in another video. I think the face sculpts are the same. I don't think they changed those. It's just a different paint job. Weapon, they have the same weapon. You know, there's no variety in the straps on their back. They're all Y-back soldiers. But yeah, these guys are really great. Because yeah, they were running around in the cartoon all the time, and it's really cool to have them represented on the shelf. There have been Joe Troopers released over the years. None in the vintage line, but in the kind of early 2000s, when they tried to continue on the vintage line, they put out a pack of green shirts, or G.I. Joe Troopers, and they had different ethnicities as well. So here you go. This is a version of a green shirt, or G.I. Joe Trooper. I don't remember exactly what they might have called them, G.I. Joe Infantry Squad or something, but they just had, you know, green helmets, basic guns. They didn't have code names. They were just kind of generic guys. So you can see how this guy, you know, is kind of homaging that look from the Sunbow cartoon, but not quite. And then in the modern era too, we also got a pack of G.I. Joe Troopers. So I've got a couple of them here. So this one you see is a lot closer because he's got the two different shades of green, the dark green pants and the lighter green top. So they're doing a pretty good job of giving us what we saw in the Sunbow cartoon. So that's one guy. Here's another. They were all pretty much the same. They've got different head sculpts. These head sculpts were all reused from other characters previously released. They had helmets too, but I think the helmets always kind of fell off of them. So I left these guys without their helmets. But yeah, these guys are definitely the best rendition of the Sunbow G.I. Joe Trooper that we've ever gotten, and I think they look fantastic. And so lastly, we'll look at Quinn. So I think the old packaging actually used to refer to him as Eskimo Tracker. The reaction figure package says Elite Tracker, which is probably a little more like politically correct. But yeah, this is a cool character that was introduced in, I believe it was issue 2 of the Marvel comic book. And the reason being that in the early days of the Marvel comic book, there simply weren't that many G.I. Joe characters. There was only, a handful of figures that the writer had to, create stories around. So Larry Hama, the writer, would end up just kind of creating his own characters, and Quinn the Eskimo was one of them. So it was an Arctic mission. So when we first met Quinn, he was dressed like this. I believe he had a dog sled. He had these bullets around his neck, which come off, which is kind of cool. That's a separate sculpted piece. And then he's got this machine gun with a bullet belt coming out of there as well. He's got his little skull necklace, which I'm not sure what those are supposed to be. Little guinea pig heads or something, but all very cool. So this was a character that fans had wanted for a long, long time since he was introduced in the early 80s. It wasn't until sometime in the early 2000s, probably around 2003 or so, that we got this Quinn figure. So you see he's got the skull necklace. The design is very true to that one. The green pants, the green gloves, the brown jacket. So yeah, people were pretty excited to finally get a Quinn figure in their collection. But Quinn stuck around in the comic books for quite a while, and they weren't always in the Arctic. He also had kind of a khaki shorts outfit, and fans really wanted that as well. And in the modern era, we got this Quinn figure. Still got his necklace, but this is what he looked like when he wasn't dressed for the cold weather. And this was a really cool figure too. So yeah, he went from a figure that we wanted for 20 plus years, and now we've got a whole handful of them, which is really cool. And of all these figures in front of me here, I'd say Quinn's probably my least favorite. Where these guys all really impress me and blow me away with their sculpts, even though it's a simple sculpt. I don't think it's quite as successful on Quinn, seeing his head in the hood and everything there. Like, it's a good figure, but I also just have less of an attachment to this character because I never owned a toy of him when I was a kid, so I didn't get to take him on any adventures out in the snowbanks or in the sandbox or anything like that. So yeah, still a cool figure, but probably my least favorite of the bunch. So before we move on to the next figure, I just thought I would quickly show you the entire reaction figure collection that I have thus far. The only figure I'm missing from the regular releases is the Snake Eyes, which I have on pre-order and will hopefully have him soon. But already they've done a variant of Snake Eyes. So I've pre-ordered the blue one, but there's a one in black that's a Target exclusive. There's a Cobra Commander with a chrome face that's also a Target exclusive. And just recently they released a blind woodsman with dog sled set, which is straight out of the Sunbow cartoon, which I'm pretty eager to get that one as well. So yeah, this is a quickly growing collection. They've already shown Wave 2, and there's all kinds of cool figures in there. So yeah, I'm looking forward to building a pretty large reaction G.I. Joe army in time. So next up, we'll take a look at the Human Torch. So this is a pretty cool figure. When you see him up close, you see he is translucent, so you can see through the plastic, and light should kind of shine through him and give him that glow effect, which is pretty cool. And here you'll see like the grill marks that I'm kind of talking about here. So for accessories, he's got this little translucent flamey piece, which just plugs onto his shoulder to give him a bit of a flame effect. He's got these two flamey effects, which we've seen before. I think they've released these with like magic characters and like translucent blue and stuff before. So they can be used if you want to put, I don't know, flames around his arms or maybe around his legs or something like that. So you've got two of those pieces. And then this last one is kind of interesting in that he has two fists. And the reason I say that's interesting is because you see here he's got one open hand, but then he's got one fist here as well. I almost wonder if that's an error and he's supposed to have two open hands in the packaging with two interchangeable fists. Now I do notice that the fist, this one here, has no extra sculpting, like it's just a fist, whereas this one here has sculpted flame effect on it. So I guess maybe that is right, and that's the variant, so I can choose to have it with flames or not, but that seems a little specific that they would even bother to do that. Anyway, so as far as the Human Torch goes, so you see here I've got this version of Johnny Storm. He's got those, probably the exact same flame effects around his wrist. So Johnny Storm is one of those characters that's just as kind of recognizable in his, non-powered up look as opposed to his powered look. So I'm really glad that they gave us both versions of these. But as far as his flame on torch mode, this is the figure that I've had in my collection for a number of years. And it's a fine figure. It's actually, I believe, the exact same figure as this one here. I just quickly looked at them before I turned on the camera. I think the only difference is this guy's boots have sculpted flame effects, whereas this guy does not. But otherwise, the torso, the arms, even the head sculpt, it might not look it, but that head sculpt, I think, is the exact same. So it's just a matter of the paint job. So yeah, this figure is fine. I think it looks cool. But it's a little bit more like how he's colored in the more modern comic books. Whereas this one here, even though it might look a little, old school with those grill marks, that's what I like. And I had a Toy Biz figure of the Human Torch back in the 90s. And this is him here. And, I really love this figure. It's not perfect. It's got these weird translucent holes in his chest because it had a pull string that lit up when he did that. And that was kind of a silly gimmick. And you can see they have all these lines, like those grill marks, sculpted into him, which works pretty well. But in the comic books, they were just drawn on as black lines. But yeah, I thought this was a really effective Human Torch figure. And this is what I think about when I think of the Human Torch. So I really think that this new version is pretty successful. I don't think he needed to be translucent. If anything, I think that kind of takes him out of the classic look. I'd almost prefer him to be solid red. But I don't think this is bad. I think it's pretty cool. And hence me going out and buying a third Human Torch. I think this one is different enough to justify the purchase. Pretty cool. So here is Shattered Glass Starscream. And again, there's nothing revolutionary about this figure. If you have Starscream, and there's a good chance you might have Starscream, or at least one of the other paint variations they released to this. So this is from about 3 years ago now. I think this is from the Siege line, which was the first part of the War for Cybertron trilogy. So if you've been collecting Transformers the last couple of years, they started it with Siege, and then Earthrise, and then Kingdom. That has essentially been the last 3 years of Transformer figures. And for 2022, we're now going into Legacy. So with the Siege line, that was supposed to be before the Transformers had come to Earth. So even though, you might be used to Starscream transforming into like an F-15 or an F-14, whatever type of jet he was, this one here, you'll notice, it's more like a spaceship that he transforms into. And that's because, he hasn't discovered Earth yet, so he wouldn't know what an F-15 looks like. So I really like that Cybertronian mode for Starscream. And when they first put this figure out, I really liked it. Here's the kind of the standard Starscream figure. So exact same mold as this guy here. Now you'll see here Starscream's got some guns on his arms. This guy has the same. So you can either choose to attach them. There's little ports like all over these guys. So you can port it onto his arm like so. Or if you want him to hold it in a more traditional sense, you can do that as well. So that's cool. Now the one other accessory this guy has is this sword with a translucent blue blade. It splits apart for some reason. I'm not sure what the significance of that is, but he should be able to hold this in his hand as well, I imagine. So there you go. That is Shattered Glass Starscream. Now, so even though he shares the sculpt with Starscream, the color scheme is supposed to be reminiscent of this guy here, which is Jetfire or Skyfire, and he is essentially he's not the one Transformer like Autobot jet, but he was kind of the first Autobot jet. Jets typically were Decepticons, so it was a big deal when we get this guy as an Autobot jet. So he's got that red, white, and black color scheme, and so that's what they're replicating here on Starscream, and I think it looks pretty cool. And as I mentioned in my intro, I can kind of justify having this guy on my shelf because it's not Starscream to me. I prefer to only have one version of each character on my shelf, but when it comes to these guys, there are so many seekers. So there's the traditional ones. So like pretty much ever since the 80s, they've taken the Starscream figure and they painted it over to look like Skywarp and Thundercracker. So I have those guys. But in the Siege mold, this particular Starscream figure, they kept repainting it over and over and over again. So I've got all kinds of weird variations of Starscream. So here you'll see this is an all red one. This was like a new character they created called Red Wing. I bought a 3-pack that had these neon colored ones. So I've got a yellow, a blue, and a green figure in that mold here. They released it in this one here. Is supposed to be kind of like a zombified version of him. He's supposed to be all rusted out. So I really like this mold, and I really like building my little army of Seekers. So with this Shattered Glass Starscream, I think that's my 10th version of this same figure in a different paint scheme. And I know some of you might be thinking, well, you're a sucker, but that's collecting. So next up are my Christmas Stormtroopers. So here you can see the standard Stormtrooper and the Snow Trooper. So these are just repaints of figures we've already got. Like I've got a dozen Stormtroopers in my collection already. So they just took the standard Stormtrooper figure and repainted them in those Christmas colors, gave them a new weapon. And the same thing with the Snow Trooper. Now mind you, I don't have dozens of these guys, but I do have one Snow Trooper here. And so again, same figure. They just repainted him, put him in some Christmas colors, gave him a candy cane striped staff. And there you go. So these are kind of silly. I could definitely see how some collectors would, totally ignore these and see them as a total cash grab. And they are. Like, these are a novelty item. These are the kind of thing you might buy somebody that doesn't buy Star Wars figures, just because they're kind of fun to put out for a couple of weeks around Christmas time. I just, when it comes to Star Wars Black Series figures, I don't buy all the figures, but I pretty much buy all the Stormtrooper variations. So when it comes to paint variations, I don't know how I could pass on these, because I just think they're a lot of fun. So you can see here, again, I'll bring up my Range Trooper in his Santa colors, and then I've got my Clone Trooper, and you see he's got a little Christmas sweater with the Death Star and some TIE fighters on there. This guy, his Christmas sweater has an X-Wing, and I'm not sure what else is going on there. Okay, that's an AT-AT walking along the bottom. That's pretty cool. And then it looks like you've got some of the like Rebel symbol there across the top. So cool pattern on there. The deco on the back isn't nearly as exciting, pretty much just plain green. But yeah, I really like the deco on these guys, and they have these cool spears. I don't know who these were originally packaged with, but they've got them painted in candy cane colors, and they've got that kind of translucent blade to make it appear like ice, which kind of goes with the weapons of the other guys that I previously had. This guy's got kind of a candy cane spear himself. This guy's got kind of an ice blade. So yeah, I think these guys look really cool together. And so there is that 5th one that I'm missing, so I may have to track him down eventually, because yeah, these guys are just a lot of fun. So next up, we've got Masters of the Universe Revelation Stinkore. And my first impressions of this guy is that he's pretty cool. This is really my first time handling a Masters of the Universe Revelation figure. I actually did get Skelegod previously from the first wave, but he was a deluxe figure. He was a little larger. And so yeah, I didn't know if looking at that figure was going to be a fair representation of all the other figures in the line. This is my first time with a standard figure, and he's pretty cool. Although I do have a complaint right out of the box, is that I think I kind of broke this guy. Not the end of the world, but just I was pulling him out of the plastic tray, and he's got these 2 tanks on his back, and one of them just popped off very easily. And so I thought, okay, well, these come off. But then this second one here does not seem to want to come off, and I noticed it looks like there might be some glue residue there, so I think this was actually supposed to not come off. So yeah, that's kind of annoying that it broke right out of the package, because now it's kind of loose. Like it doesn't take much, so I might have to glue that back in place. So anyway, I was going to say he had removable canisters as an accessory, but I don't think he's actually supposed to. So what he does have is a shield, which Stinkore pretty much always has. And he's got a couple of extra hands. So you see he's got one fist and one gripping hand. So he has another gripping hand here. And then he's got an open hand over here, so he can do some slapping. And then he has an alternate head, which is kind of strange. I really like that head that's on there. But then he's got this one here, which looks like it's kind of sleepy or something. Like, I don't know. He's got this mask on. And so, I don't know. It almost looks like he's gone to the dentist and he's gassed himself to sleep. And the mask is actually removable. And you see he's got an open mouth there. He still looks kind of tired. And there's a little hole in the mouth. It's pretty well disguised. I don't know if you can see that there. But the mask has a little plug to put into his mouth so that stays in place. And so I was kind of wondering if maybe the mask could go on either head. But I don't think this face has a hole. So it's not intended for this head, I don't think. But anyway, since this is my first time with one of these figures, I'll just quickly talk about the articulation and stuff. You can see there he's got a double jointed elbow, so that's a good range of motion for the arm. Double jointed knees as well. So, oh, there goes that thing again. He should be able to get his knees pretty much right back like that. He's got a swivel there, swivel at the boot. Yep, his ankles, you can see they rock side to side and forward and backwards, so that gives him a good range of movement there. He turns at the waist. It looks like there is an ab crunch that might be kind of obstructed by the armor. Ball jointed arms. Does he twist at the wrists and also articulate front and back at the wrist? Doesn't swivel at the glove, but yeah, lots of good articulation. Head looks like it can pretty much go anywhere. It's a little hindered by the armor on this particular figure, but anyway, very cool. Very cool. I really like the sculpting on this guy. Like, it's clearly Stinkore, but they have kind of modernized him a little bit. And yeah, this is a pretty convincing argument to buy more of these figures. Because like what I have already, so I have the vintage Stinkore in my collection from the 80s. This here is the Origins figure. So this just came out last year. And this is pretty much a straight remake of the classic 80s figure, except with increased articulation in the elbows and knees and stuff. But yeah, so this is what the head looked like on the vintage Stinkore and everything. And I think this figure is really cool. A really nice homage to the that vintage figure. But what I've always loved is the Classics line that started coming out in 2009. And so this here is the Classics Stinkore. So you can see he's a little bit bigger. He's a little bit taller, a little bit more detailed than anything we had gotten before. You know, more articulated. Just a really great figure. I kind of thought this was the pinnacle of Masters of the Universe action figures. And it's going to take a lot more than just this one figure to convince me otherwise. But these figures are really hard to get now. So if you're just getting into the Masters of the Universe, maybe say the new Netflix cartoon, you know, rekindled your love for the brand, and you thought, well, these ones are a little too childish for me. I want to get these nice collector figures. They're really tough to get. On the secondary market, these guys, a lot of them sell for more than $100 a piece. Some of them even maybe substantially more than that, like $200-300. And yeah, the articulation on them is a little dated. They've all got single jointed knees and elbows, so they don't have the same range of movement. That I could definitely see that there is a gap, you know, for these guys. For people that want figures like this but can't get them, this is a really nice substitute. And in some cases, these are probably going to be even better than the Classics figures. And this one here, like I don't really have any complaints about the Classics, so it's hard for me to say this one's better. But I do like a lot about this figure. And if I had missed out on that Classics figure, I think if I was able to get this guy, I would not be so concerned about chasing that guy down anymore. Because I think this guy is, you know, he's got such a classic look. Some of the Revelation figures, like Tila and stuff, they've changed the design pretty drastically. But this guy here, he's pretty much a spot-on classic version. And the changes they've made, like adding that blue around his eyes and everything, making him look less like Merman and more like his own character, I really like. The alternate head sculpt is a nice idea. You know, the increased articulation, it's really great. So yeah, this guy is really impressing me. And I don't know if I'm going to go all in on this line, but there's definitely a couple other figures that I was thinking of getting, depending on my thoughts on this guy here. And I think I might go order myself one or two more of these guys a little bit later on tonight. So next up, we've got Super 7's Ultimate Donatello outside of the packaging, and he's pretty great. There's no real surprises here because this is essentially the fourth time in about a year that I'm getting this figure. but that's that's pretty standard when it comes to Ninja Turtle figures. Usually all 4 of them come out at once, so when a new set of turtles comes out, that's the first thing you get, 4 new turtles. It's been a little tough to be this patient to get these Super 7 turtles. So originally I wasn't sure if I was going to get this whole line, and the first wave had Raphael, and I actually did not order him because I thought, you know what, I really like the Ninja Turtles I'm getting from NECA right now, and these guys are just a little too expensive, so I'm going to pass on Raphael. But then the second wave came out, and I got Leonardo, and by the time I got Leonardo, I thought, you know what, he's so great, I really should get all 4 turtles. But by that point, Raphael was sold out, so I didn't know what I was going to do. Fortunately, they did a second production run of Raphael, so I was able to get him. So I ordered Leonardo in Wave 2, then I got Michelangelo in Wave 3, and then I've just been waiting for my Wave 4 Donatello to show up. And now here I finally have all of them, and yeah, this is awesome, because these are just incredible figures. I think they're all pretty much the exact same from the neck down, like the core figure. You can see they all have different head sculpts, and they all have different belts. So Leo's got the double straps the same way Donatello does, but Leo's got on the back, he's got the these areas where they can hold his swords. Whereas Michelangelo, he's just got the single belt there, but then he's got spots where he can store his nunchucks on the back. And Raph, same thing. He's got the size stored on the front of his belt, and then he's got this extra piece here for this extra blade on the back. So very cool. Donatello, I haven't even looked at him yet, but I'm sure he's got a spot for his bow staff instead of the swords like Leonardo has. So pretty standard stuff. All these guys are modeled after the original Playmates toys in the 80s. So not only are, like, those figures were all identical as well, but they were different colors. So that's why all these turtles are just slightly like different shades of green. So they're all recognizable that way. But they also have the different, I'll call it web gear, I guess. I don't know what you call this, but the belts, it's all different style, but they're based on what the vintage toys wore. So yeah, as far as articulation and everything goes, I'm not going to cover all that again because this is the 4th figure in the line, but it's good. So they're well articulated, they're well made, they feel nice, good quality figures that are good size when compared to the vintage Ninja Turtles. They're like twice the size of them. I didn't bother to grab them for a comparison, but like if I bring Human Torch back in here, who's a 6-inch figure, you can sort of see, how they measure up size-wise. They're nice, good size figures. Now he has a lot of accessories. That's kind of one of the calling cards of the Ultimates line. However, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them either, because most of them are repeats of that we saw with the other Ninja Turtles. So with the old Turtles in the 80s, this is what you got, a weapons tree. And you had to punch each of these weapons out. So all the turtles had the same. 2 brown throwing stars, 2 brown little knives, this brown bladed weapon, and then they all had this solid brown, their signature weapon. So you see Donatello's got 2 bow staffs on either side here. Michelangelo would have had nunchucks, with no chains or anything like that. They would have all been just brown weapons. So I don't really know why Super 7 gives us this. I guess it's just a nice little nod to the vintage figures. Maybe some people, if you're a total purist and you want to display your Donatello with bow staffs like you had when you were a kid, this is the bow staff you would go with, and you could punch all these things apart. This thing acts like a little weapons rack. Like it stands up like this, and you can hang out these weapons on these pegs and stuff if you really wanted to. But besides that, they also give you all those same weapons painted. So I've got these 4 times over now because they came with all my other Ninja Turtles. So there's that bladed weapon. You've got the 2 other smaller bladed weapons. You've got the 2 throwing stars, except this time in silver. And then you get the 2 bow staffs, except these ones are much more impressive looking. They've got that kind of like wood grain paint on them, and the tape is painted. So these look much better than like those standard unpainted brown things there. So yeah, again, I don't know why anybody would really want those things, but whatever. Now what this figure does come with that the vintage figure did not is that we get a slice of pizza, of course. We get 2 turtle communicators. So we get one that's open and one that's closed. Oops. So yeah, So there you go. So that's cool. You get a bunch of extra hands. I think there's 6 extra hands here. So you get some closed fists for punching. You get some open hands. You get some gripping hands. So different ones of these would probably work better with different weapons. Like I think this is the kind of hand that would work good with Raphael's sai. So yeah, cool that you get all those extra hands. And then my favorite accessory that these guys come with are these new head sculpts that are sculpted by the 4 horsemen. And it kind of gives a whole new design of these turtles. You might have noticed when I had all 4 turtles out here that this guy looks the most like the vintage toy design because this head is pretty much the exact head of the vintage toy. One turtle, Donatello, had the teeth showing on both sides. Another turtle had just the teeth showing on one side and the mouth was closed over here. The other guy had a totally closed mouth. And then I think the other guy had teeth showing on one side and not the other. And so that's kind of how you differentiate all those heads. And those are cool. I still have those vintage figures on display. So if you want to recreate them, you can do that with these heads. But I really like that they've given us these new heads, which kind of like change the look of these figures. And so you might have noticed with all my other turtles, I have them displayed with the newly designed head. So none of these look like their vintage counterparts. And I just prefer this look. So with Donatello, I will definitely be displaying him on my shelf with this look here. It's just a really cool design. And, if I want to look at that head, I still have my vintage figure in the shelf as well. So very cool. I like this a lot. Really happy to finally complete my Ultimate Ninja Turtle collection. And lastly, we're going to take a look at Atlas Destroyer. So as I mentioned before, this is the new Jaeger design that we got in Pacific Rim Black on Netflix. So this is from Bandai. It's part of their Spirits line. So very nicely articulated. Well, I actually haven't even got to the articulation, but I've got some of their Spirits figures in the past, and I can tell you they're nicely articulated, and this guy looks to be about the same. Like you can see those ball joints there, good range of movement on the shoulders, on the elbow. But also, I just really like the paint job. That's the thing I meant to point out first. Like this guy just looks a lot more interesting than most of the other Jaeger designs that we get. I really like that red kind of metallic paint on the face. That looks really cool and it really pops. But yeah, just having this kind of like militaristic eagle design, everything there, like it just looks really cool. So yeah, some good poses with this guy. The head can move around pretty good. It's a little hindered by these shoulder pieces here. Turns at the waist. There's a ab crunch there. Shoulder pad came off quite easily. So lock that back in there. Let's see. Good range movement at the legs. There's the knee movement, ankle, good range of movement there. So yeah, this guy looks cool, and you can probably get him in some pretty sweet poses. Yeah, very cool. Now, this guy does have a couple of accessories, not a lot, but you'll see he's got 2 closed fists there. So he's also got 2 open hands. So if you want him to give somebody a good slap as well, you can do that. Now, another thing that's really cool is if you watched this show, the kids that find this Jaeger, they're not really trained pilots. So the Jaeger gets a little beat up during their adventures, and at one point it loses an arm, and they have to go kind of find like a junkyard to find a replacement arm. And they get this arm here with the big kind of gripping hook. And, it doesn't match paint-wise, but that was kind of the whole idea. It kind of looked like, when C-3PO ended up with a red arm and stuff, because they just kind of replace pieces with whatever they have laying around. So this looks like it just pops into place pretty easily. And then you've got some nice articulation up on that as well. This thing does seem to come apart pretty easily. I just popped a claw on him there. Looks like it popped back into place relatively easily, but yeah, I've only had this guy out of the package for about 2 minutes, and already his shoulder pad has popped off and his little claw has popped off. So I wouldn't say he's breakable, as those things are meant to come off, but it is a little delicate. I don't know if it would withstand playtime if you were giving this to a child or something. Now, another thing he has here is this whip, which he uses. It kind of looks like Scorpion's spear from Mortal Kombat. And I think he launches that out of this arm. I'm not entirely sure where it plugs in, but I'm sure it plugs in somewhere. Anyway, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this guy. Not because he isn't cool, but because this video is already at about an hour and I don't want to go much longer. But also, I've got this is episode 161 of Mike's Collection. I've been doing this for coming up on 3 years. And, I've got a pretty good following. I appreciate all of you guys that follow along and subscribe and everything. But even like most of my videos, if they do well, they kind of end up around, 100, 200 views. Some of them really pop out and they run away with it and they end up with like 500, 600 views. Some of them, like this one here, where it's kind of just a general mismatch of all kinds of different stuff and it's not really focused. These ones might top out at around 50 views. Not that many people watch it. Anyway, I have done 2 videos reviewing Pacific Rim figures, and they get way more views than anything else. I have one Pacific Rim video that's got 100,000 views. So there's obviously an audience for this stuff. So what I'm probably going to do is, rather than spend a whole lot of time talking about this guy now, is I'm going to probably do a separate video, just a shorter, like 15, 20-minute video, where I just talk about this figure. Because probably a lot more people will be interested in watching a video just on this guy, and they're not going to want to have to sit through an hour where I talk about G.I. Joes and Ninja Turtles and all that other stuff. So for you, my general audience, if you think this guy's cool, stay tuned, and I'll do a more detailed video on him later. For now, I will just bring out another one of Bandai's figures from one of the previous movies, if you're wondering scale-wise how this guy compares. So here he is next to Gypsy Avenger. So you can see he's right into scale with him. They look good together. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. Okay, so that was a quick look at all of my early purchases of 2022. I know it was a bit of a mixed bag. Ninja Turtles, Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Pacific Rim. So thank you very much if you actually stuck around and watched this whole thing. That's one of the weird things about this channel is I have a very diverse interests here all over the place. There's probably not a whole lot of people that like all of the same things I like. But hopefully you like just tuning in and hanging out with me, and you'll stick around and listen to me talk about Pacific Rim figures, even if that's not really your thing. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Please leave me your comments below. I'm always happy to talk to you, answer your questions. I don't get nearly enough comments as I would like. I always get like 3 or 4 comments or something, but yeah, I'd like your input. What do you think of these figures? Are they cool? Is there anything that you think I should be getting? I don't know. Let's talk. Anyway, thank you very much. I'll be back very soon with another video. I still have lots of stuff to talk about, so I will see you then. Ciao.